Sure, let's start with our middle one.
Okay, call to order and then you can.
Yeah.
You on?
Yep.
All right, it's the anointed hour. This is the regularly scheduled meeting of the Portsmouth Planning Board, our monthly meeting for Wednesday, October 14th, 2021. You want to move?
Yep, so if you're joining us on the phone line, to raise your hand to ask a question, you can dial *9 to raise your hand, and to mute and unmute yourself, you can dial *6. And if you're using the Zoom app, you can use the raise hand function. And just make sure you unmute yourself after you raise your hand and you're called on.
All set?
Good.
All right. So we're going to move on to the agenda. Are there any continuances and modifications, Ms. Lozinski? No. All right, we're moving on to item number 2. That's our minutes from our last meeting of March 10, 2021. You should have found that in your packet. What's the pleasure of the board on the minutes?
I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes as written. I couldn't find anything.
I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Are there any typos, changes, anything, anybody see any errors?
Hello,
Yes, who's this? Who's speaking?
I don't know. I think I might have promoted someone.
Dave Garso.
Oh, how you doing, Dave? Hang on. Did you have something to change on the minutes?
Yes.
Go ahead.
I wanted to say that I had voted in favor of item number 4, but I lost connection.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we kind of lost you, so we kind of tossed you into limbo.
I hear you.
But you would like that to read that you voted also in favor?
Yes, and I had no problem with adjourning as well.
Okay. You're a good man, Mr. Garza.
Remember that at the end of the night.
You'll amend your,
Yeah, I'll amend that too.
I'll amend my second.
Yeah.
are there any other changes or modifications? All right, hearing none, I'll call for a vote, and I'll do it by name. Mr. Harding,
Aye.
Mr. Lopes,
Aye.
Ms. Wilson. We'll come back to Ms. Wilson. Mr. Garceau.
Aye.
Mr. Tibbetts.
Aye.
Palat.
Aye.
Ms. Wilson. I kind of lost Ms. Wilson there.
Can you hear me now?
Strassy,
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out.
hang on 1 second. We don't want to cut Kate out. I think she's sitting there in front of the bridge, isn't she?
No. Seth's enjoying his life in San Francisco or wherever he is. There she is.
There she is. A thumbs up. We'll take that.
Okay.
Kate. Thank you. The minutes passed. There are no abstentions or objections. All right, we're moving on to item number 3 rather, which is West Main Solar One LLC, owner, I'll mispronounce this, I know it's Zog Marion, trustee in Regal LLC. Location is AP 44 Lot 15 West Main Road. Master plan application for the development of a 3.1, I assume M1 is megawatt, ground-mounted solar photovoltaic facility. Is the applicant prepared to go forward?
Maybe represented by Helen Anthony.
So let her introduce herself.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. I'm hoping that the rest of my team is also recognized and being heard.
Can you identify yourself, please, and your address?
Yes, I'd be happy to do that. Good evening, Chairman and members of the planning board.
Hang on. Start again.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, well, it was stated there for a second.
Okay, here I am. My name is Attorney Helen Anthony from Handy Law LLC, 42 Waybosset Street, Providence, Rhode Island, 02903.
You may proceed.
Okay, and I am here on behalf of the applicant, West Main Solar One LLC, with regard to the master plan review for a major land development of a 3.16 megawatt ground-mounted solar project at property located on West Main Road, less than 1 mile north of Russo Road, Assessor's Plat 44, Lot 15. The property is owned by Marion Zog, trustee, and Regal LLC. The 18.3 acre site is zoned light industrial on the east side and commercial on the west side, which is the side that abuts West Main Road. The total development area is 8.2 acres, which is 45% of the site. I'm here tonight with Scott Milnes and Steve Kerr of West Main Solar One LLC, the developer, Andrew Vardakis and Jean Haggerty of Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions. Those are the engineers, and Kevin Alverson, the landscape architect, to present this project and answer your questions and those of the public. And I just want to make sure that they're going to be able to speak and that you see them on your screen.
Graciela?
They're all
They're all on.
Great, perfect. You have in your packet the following: a master plan application for major land development with attachments and the report from the design review board. Pursuant to Solar Energy System Zoning Ordinance 2020-12-14, the proposed solar energy system is allowed to be developed on Plat 44, Lot 15, with the approval of the major development review by the planning board, subject to the restrictions set forth elsewhere in the Solar Energy Systems Ordinance. By way of background, this project was originally presented to the planning board at a pre-application meeting on January 13th, 2021, and the design review board on March 16th, 2021. The applicant will address the concerns that were raised by the abutters at the pre-app meeting and how the applicant intends to incorporate the recommendations made by the design review board. If it makes sense to you, Mr. Chairman, I may recommend that the team be allowed to present and then open it up for questions, if that works for you.
On your presentation, please.
Okay. So I'd like to introduce Andrew Vardakis of Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions to review the plans with you in detail.
That was garbled. Could you do that again, please?
Sure. I'd like to introduce Andrew Vardakis to review the plans with you and detail how the project satisfies the requirements. Drew, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Helen. Members of the board, thanks for having us back this evening. My name is Andrew Vardakis. I'm a civil engineer. I work for Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions. We're located at 275 Promenade Street in Providence and 271 Mill Road, Massachusetts. I'm registered in the state of Rhode Island, and as well as our company Wood, registered in the state of Rhode Island. I'm the engineer of record on the project. So as Helen stated, we were here back in January to present the project. And I can see you have the site plan up, so I won't bother to share my screen. But essentially, the project involves the 18-acre lot and the project area of about 12 acres of that. Within that 12 acres, the fence line occupies about 8 acres. So there on the first sheet, you can see the existing conditions plan. Wood's role as part of this project is the consultant to the applicant. We're the engineers, we do the wetland surveying, we develop the permit applications and the site plan drawings. So as you can see here, the first page is the existing conditions plan. It shows the lot, the topography, the property lines, the abutters, things of that nature. So if we go to the second sheet, it shows the proposed site plan, which shows the solar array and everything associated with it. So if you're looking on the west side, the left side of the screen is the west, that's West Main Road. You can see that dark gray hatch area coming in. That's the access road, 20-foot wide access road. We placed that adjacent to the property line to situate it between two existing utility poles and a catch basin. That's the construction entrance, which has some larger stone rock for construction vehicles to reduce the amount of sediment being tracked out onto the paved road. And as you can see, there's a bend in that road, so we can sweep the road away from the property line and get into the project area. One, to get away from the property line, but two, to minimize views as you look into the project site. So if you follow that road in, there's a turnaround, a hammerhead turnaround there for construction vehicles and maintenance vehicles, which leads up to the fence line. It's a little hard to see, but that road essentially terminates at the fence line where there's a proposed 12-foot wide gate. So that fence line essentially encompasses the array. The solar panels are those east to west hatched lines in the center. So the 6-foot high chain link fence surrounds the array. Those panels are mounted on a racking system that's ground mounted, fixed tilt. They don't move. The lower side of the panels are about 2 or 3 feet off the ground, and the back side around 8 or 9 feet, but less than 10 feet. So underneath the array is a low growth grass, so that the grass does not grow above the lower edge of the panels in between and underneath the arrays. So as you can see, the project is surrounded by the fence line, and it's a little harder to see, but there's another line that's labeled TC, and that's a tree clearing line. So with that tree clearing line, and there's an LOD line, limit of disturbance. That's the ultimate limit of work and limit of disturbance area. So with that, we abide by the property line setbacks, a minimum of 50 feet, which you can see in the upper right-hand corner is the closest we get to the property line. That's a 50-foot setback. And that 50 feet follows around the east side of the property as well as the south. But within that 50-foot property line setback, we're not touching any of the vegetation. The vegetation remains. And we can get into more of the vegetation and screening as we move forward with Kevin, our landscape architect. But essentially, the property line setbacks are maintained at a minimum of 50 feet. As you can see from a stormwater and grading and drainage perspective, since we last were here in January, we developed some preliminary stormwater plans. So up in the northwest corner, the upper left corner, you can see some grading contours. There's a stormwater basin there. And then also to the south side, there's three separate basins. Again, you can see the darker lines. Those are proposed grading contours along the south side. And those are there to account for the tree clearing and the change in vegetation and the change in ground cover. What we're looking at now is stormwater calculations to look at the change in runoff due to the tree clearing, which is converted to grass, as I mentioned, underneath the array. So as part of this permitting through the town, we're also permitting through Rhode Island DEM. So we'll have a Rhode Island the RIPD's Rhode Island Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. That's for disturbances over 1 acre, which this is. So we'll be applying for a construction general permit and doing these stormwater designs and calculations as part of that. So as part of the, I'm the civil engineer, but as part of the electrical piece of this, the solar panels, they collect the energy. There's inverters within the array that convert that energy and send it out. There's 2 boxes there that say proposed equipment pads. So there's underground conduit that collects the energy, goes to those 2 equipment pads on the west side, inside the fenced area there. And then there's an underground conduit that goes out to the proposed utility poles. And those series of poles, you can see they're kind of the black dots along the road, which head on out to West Main Road, where the electricity is interconnected to the existing electrical grid. So that's kind of my high level overall summary. Detailed in your packets, there's the narrative that goes through the details, the number of modules, more detailed information, and also in Appendix F, how we address parts of the narrative for signage and emergency contact information and things of that nature. The rest of the drawings there, erosion and sediment controls, the fencing there was some comments last time about the fence height and leaving a 6-inch gap to allow for wildlife passage underneath the fence. So we've incorporated those comments into the fencing. You can see a cross section of the solar PV array there, what the racking system looks like. There's the access road, the construction entrance, some silt fence for the erosion and sedimentation control. So those are all the construction type details as you go through. In the sheet prior, I skipped, but those were also additional notes regarding the DEM, grading and drainage notes, erosion control, seeding and vegetation, things of that nature. So I'm happy to take any questions, or Helen, do you want to move on to Kevin next?
No, we'll see if board members have questions. Anybody have any questions of this witness?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I was just wondering if I could ask Drew to go over Schedule F.
All right, that's you. So he has not finished talking. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, so as Helen mentioned, in attachment F, we go through compliance with the zoning requirements. So you'll see that in the packet. I believe it's page 54 within that PDF document. So we can walk through them one by one if you'd like, but we outline each item there. Number one, how we require address the reviews and approvals pursuant to the town. Number two is this qualifies as a large solar energy system. Number three, I mentioned the height will be less than 10 feet with the solar panels. Number four was the yard setbacks, minimum 50 feet. Number five was cited and designed to minimize impacts to the neighbors and natural resources. And we looked at that from a stormwater perspective and minimize clearing as much as possible. But Kevin can get into the design to minimize impacts to neighbors for screening and buffering and those types of things. Number six is the interconnection. There's an impact study in the packet provided by the applicant from National Grid. The study is part of the project. 7 was land clearing. I mentioned the 12 acres of clearing, but no topsoil stripping, no grading, no major earth moving except for what's needed to put in those stormwater basins that I mentioned. Number 8 was the fencing. I mentioned that 6-foot high fence with the 6 inches of passage underneath. Number 9, I mentioned the 50-foot screening and buffering. We'll get into that a little bit more. 10, the ground cover and plant species. There's a seed mix sheet on there, but certainly amenable to pollinator-friendly seed mixes and no invasive species proposed. 11, no lighting proposed, minimum necessary for safety, but none proposed at this time. 12 was signage. I mentioned that will abide by the town side ordinance, with emergency contact information. 13 was power lines. I mentioned that the underground conduit from the array heading to the equipment pads and then out to the first pole, and from there, power goes overhead out to the interconnection point on West Main Road. Site control, the applicants can speak to that, but there'll be site control documents submitted with the O&M plan as part of the final package. 15, I mentioned stormwater analysis and calculations. We're currently finalizing those, looking at some on-site soil investigations to confirm the soil mapping, to confirm that our designs are accurate based on the soil mapping. 16, no proposed pesticides or herbicides. 17, accepting that any changes or modifications will require approval. Final as-built, I believe the applicant is amenable to the remaining items here and can speak to the abandonment, decommissioning, surety. If there's detailed questions on that, I'm sure that Scott or Steve can chime in from the applicant's side. So I believe that's all I have going through the attachment F, zoning ordinance requirements. Helen, back to you.
Counselor, is he done?
You might be on mute there, Helen.
He had you muted, so
I am
try.
so sorry. I do that so you don't get any feedback and then I mute myself. Yes. Next, I'd like to introduce Kevin Alverson.
Any member of the board have a question to this witness?
I have a question.
Mr. Lopes?
This is for the engineer. It appears that you have very little to no major topography changes on the site. Is that correct?
I am so sorry. I'm having trouble hearing you.
It appears you have little to no major topography changes to the site. Is that correct?
Yes.
I would have to yeah, go ahead, Drew.
Sorry, Helen. Yes, that's correct. The only major grading, which isn't exactly major, but the proposed grading that's shown on the plan is for the stormwater basins that I mentioned. The area within the site of the solar array is proposed to follow the contour of the land as it is. So you're correct. There's no major proposed grading.
Anybody else have any questions? If not, I do. You're talking about these storm drain calculations. What storm are you basing your calculations on?
I believe we are looking at the 100-year storm. My colleague, Gene Haggerty, is also on the line. Correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it's a 100-year storm.
Yes, that's correct. We ran the 25 and the 100-year storms.
Who are you and what's your address?
All right, Gene Haggerty from Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions. And I actually work at 271 Mill Road in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. Working with Drew on the plans. We've looked at the 1 year, 2 year, 25 year and 100-year flood event.
But your calculation is going to be based on a 100-year plan.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, you may proceed, Councilor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next, I'd like to introduce Kevin Alverson to discuss in detail the landscaping plan for the project. Kevin, could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Kevin Alverson. I'm a registered landscape architect and the president of Kevin M. Alverson Landscape Architecture in Wickford, Rhode Island. I'm registered in the state of Rhode Island for landscape architecture. I was contacted on this project to review the site for its existing buffering, as well as ensuring proper visual screening and buffering from the abutting properties and public roadways. I went out and visited the site back in late January to assess the site and any view corridors from West Main Road, as well as the abutting residences as best I could from the surrounding areas and from the site itself. Found that the site is largely vegetated with predominantly deciduous or non-evergreen vegetation, although there is a spattering of native evergreen species through there, as you would imagine, in an area like this. But I worked closely with the project engineers and the developers on proposing a site layout that would minimize disturbance to that existing buffer that's out there, as well as providing supplemental buffering where necessary to ensure that that any sight lines from those abutting residences would be obscured as far as components of the facility. So, although it largely still, from the landscape side of things, the methodology and concept for the buffering was, as Mr. Vardakis had mentioned earlier, we provide a minimum of a 50-foot no-cut buffer around the entire facility. And you can see that around the perimeter where the aerial photography is not cropped out. But then within that area, within the proposed project area, you can see that sort of medium green hatched area. And where possible, that's between 60 and 85 feet additionally to that 50-foot no cut buffer, which is what we're calling a limited vegetation. It's for a shade clearing, which would really just remove the cutting and removal of larger vegetation, but maintaining any vegetation that's under the 12-foot height range. And the purpose of that is to ensure that we still have a thick vegetation cover, but we're not shading the solar capturing ability for the proposed panels out there. So what happens in these projects when you do that is that there's a lot of shrub matter that's within the wooded areas and also in the seed bed that's in there. That once the shading trees are removed from there, it actually does help to thicken that up. But we're not relying solely on that. We are also providing some supplemental buffering in the more sensitive areas. So if in the northwest corner where Mr. Vardakis had mentioned, one of the stormwater basins is proposed. With that abutter that's over there, we are providing some, you can see the supplemental tree cover that's in there, those sort of spiky looking things, those are proposed evergreen trees. Those coupled with the existing 50-foot buffer that we're maintaining, the no-cut buffer, and also the grade change in that area where it's a good 10, 12 feet or more from the abutter to, we'll say, the stormwater basin area. We feel will suitably obscure any views of the solar array. Also in that northwest corner, as I mentioned, we were working closely with the project engineer and the developers on aligning the roadway in such a way that we would minimize views into the site. So rather than having kind of a straight shot that goes right down into the site, so if you're standing right on West Main Road and looking into the site, we sort of hooked the road around, pulled it away from the abutter, and then also provided supplemental buffering at the end of that to help obscure any views into the solar facility. Further along the western portion of the site, as we move south, we are maintaining that large no-cut buffer, which is approximately 230 feet, in addition to that 60 foot of what we are calling the limited vegetative clearing. We feel that that will, in concept, obscure the view of the facility from West Main Road along that run. However, like with any of these projects, what the intent is to conceptualize and methodize a buffering scheme that's going to buffer it from a plan. But really, once we get into the site and start doing the clearing, and you start seeing any potential site lines that might be coming into the site, we would certainly plan to supplement buffering as well in that area. However, from a design standpoint, it doesn't seem that it needs it right now, but it's certainly something that we will continue to assess as the project moves, as it's further evolved and developed. Along the southwest and the southern portion, you'll see that there's some supplemental buffering that's placed along there as well. Where those basins are, we're maintaining that 50-foot no-cut buffer, but then where the basins are themselves, the southern portion of that, and I have on sheet 2 of this set, there's actually a couple of cross sections studies that we did through there. The southern, yeah, we'll see that in a second. So the lower cross section on this sheet is of that southern property line, a typical cross section. And what you can see on the right-hand side of your sheet is residence from a first floor standpoint, viewing into the site. These are the lines along the bottom is the proposed grade as it's designed currently. And you'll see that from those residences, there's certainly their cleared backyard area. And in certain areas, there's actually more vegetation between the house and the property line. But from a, sort of a minimal buffering standpoint, we have that 50-foot no-cut buffer you can see in the center of your sheet. And then on the left-hand side of that, AKA the northern section of that no-cut buffer, we have a bermed portion where the stormwater basin, the southern edge of the stormwater basin is bermed up a number of feet. And the proposal would be to plant on top of that buffer, on top of that berm, I apologize, with an evergreen, supplemental evergreen buffer. And those lines that you can see, the dashed lines with the arrows on them across, those are view lines from a human perspective standpoint on the first floor. Similarly, along the eastern property line, you'll see that cross section up above. That's where we are not anticipating any requirements for stormwater facilities due to the existing topography, which we're trying to maintain to the greatest extent practicable. You'll see that from the abutting residences, that same view line, the 50-foot no cut buffer, but then there's supplementally on top of that, and I'm just calling out 70 because it sort of ranges, but it ranges from 60 to 85. That area is that limited clearing section. So you can see we're maintaining the shrub vegetation, but on the, we'll call it the eastern side of that, so between the no-cut buffer and that limited clearing buffer, that's where we're proposing a temporary temporary clearing path that we would just remove trees as necessary and shrubs to be able to add supplemental vegetation in there. And you can see that evergreen tree that's placed in there. That's the intent is to maintain all of the vegetation on the west side of that tree, have that the row of supplemental plantings strategically placed to obscure the facility from the residences, plus the 50-foot no-cut buffer on there. So collectively, we're well over 135 to 150 feet of buffering before you get to the fence line of the facility. Along the northern portion of the site, I think I had mentioned before, but just in order to cover all bases, we are, that is abutting the open space area, or I'd say non-developed area, that's to the north of the site. We are maintaining a minimum of 50-foot no cut along there, but as you go, and at the tightest point, as Mr. Vardakis had mentioned earlier, that's your 50-foot area. But as you go further west, it expands out to over 100 feet, or close to 100 feet, I should say. Near the western side or northwest corner, abutting those undeveloped portions to the north. However, with that said, we are also proposing some supplemental buffering, a mixed buffer in that area of deciduous and evergreen vegetation. The intent would be to create more of a naturalized buffer in that area, and also provide some species that are pollinator friendly, and native species that would be typical of what you would find in these areas. But as you can imagine, a lot of woodland non-developed portions start to become a little bit of monoculture, or sort of just a handful of vegetative species. So from an ecological standpoint, we found that peppering in additional shrubbery and trees will provide for better habitat and what essentially will become the solar array itself, essentially become a field habitat. So it actually, it provides a different form of habitat in these areas that is actually good for avian species, birds of prey, that they can have that fringe vegetation where they can nest, and also good for pollinator species of insects and and the like. But they have sort of hunting ground as well to be able to utilize the field habitat where the array is. The third sheet of that set is mainly just typical details and such of the planting for the best practices for survival of the plantings. Also incorporates warranty information and things in keeping with the town's ordinance. I believe it's a 2-year warranty on all plant species for the supplemental buffering in accordance with the town's requirements. And then there's also various notations about the seeding and things of that nature. We will be working with the project engineers as well on developing seed mixes for the array, but the intent is to have a low grow but pollinator friendly field habitat species that would be planted. So low maintenance, no pesticides, no fertilizing necessary other than to establish the ground cover to be able to make sure that we have a stabilized surface once the project is developed. If there are any questions of the board, I'm happy to answer any of those, or if Attorney Anthony, if you feel I've missed anything, please let me know.
I don't think you've missed anything.
All right, so any members of the board have any questions?
Sure.
Mr. Lopes.
How should we incorporate the comments from the design review.
That was exactly my question.
I do want to commend the landscape architect. He's one of the few people that actually filled out the revision block correctly. It actually states that you incorporated the design review board comments, so I commend you for that, but I still think we should incorporate these for the record.
I think it should be made an exhibit of the petition. That's up to the council.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. We would like an exhibit to this application.
So label this exhibit 1.
Exhibit 1.
My follow-on question, Mr. Chair, is, I'm sorry if I'm going to mispronounce your last name, Alvasian?
Alderson.
Alverson, the landscape architect. So all the comments from Exhibit 1, the Design Review Board meeting of March 16th have been incorporated into your landscape plan. Is that correct?
That's correct. They had some comments as to species and placement of plants in particular, and we have addressed that in this revised submission.
Thank you.
I can't see any member of the board. Anybody else on the board have any questions? Oh, I put my glasses on. All right, we may proceed, council.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think that completes our presentation. We believe we satisfied the requirements for the master plan approval, requirements set forth in the solar energy system zoning ordinance, and we would ask for your approval of the master plan.
All right, well, we got a ways to go before that, but
Okay,
you can make your speech at the end.
okay, thank you.
All right, we're now going to open this up to the public. Does any member of the public wish to speak to this petition? Michael?
We have a few, we have David Howard. David, if you could unmute yourself and state your name and address for the record.
My name's David Howard. I'm at 36 Mariel Rose Drive in Portsmouth. And I have a couple of questions. The plan that I reviewed earlier did not contain information about the runoff and the basin that you had in the northwest corner. The elevation there is about 185 feet, but at the southern end of the boundary, the elevation is about 10 feet lower. Now, my question is, having seen what happened to property north of West Passage, where a developer created a berm, and the berm created a backup of water on adjacent property, which then flowed into the backyards of a number of residents on West Passage every time they had a heavy rain. Is your analysis that even though where you show that area at 10 feet higher, that there's no risk of runoff going to those properties down on Chelsea Road?
Okay, let's have that answered. Counselor?
I'd like Rudy to do that, please.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, David. Great question.
Name, please.
Yep, Andrew Vardakis,
All right.
civil engineer from Wood. Thanks for the question. Great question, David. Yes, and that's the full intent of our analysis that we're completing right now, that those basins will be sized appropriately, as the comment was before, for the 100-year storm. And that's the intent, is that they're sized properly, that there's no overflow, no runoff, that the abutting properties won't be impacted from a flooding perspective like that. So we're in the process of finalizing that design now. And also, as I mentioned, with the on-site investigation to confirm the soil types, to make sure we have those calculations designed properly.
Mr. Howard, did that answer your question?
That answers one question. I have another question about.
Shoot, go for it.
Okay, thanks. I believe the landscaper architect said that he used a view from surrounding properties that is level with the first floor. Now, I live across the street from a Butters, and from my second floor, I can see into the wooded lot. From my second floor, I'm guessing that I'm going to be able to see parts of that array. Did you raise your elevation at all to see what the view would be for the abutters from their second floors, since most of them are colonial type houses?
Counselor?
May I please have Kevin answer that question?
Sure. Yes, this is Kevin Alverson. Yes, this is Kevin Alverson of Kevin Alverson Landscape Architecture. If we could go to the cross section, the intent of the second or the 50-foot, the no cut buffer in particular, is that there are larger trees and vegetation that are existing in there. So that coupled with what we're proposing for the supplemental buffer on that, we feel from a second floor, if you can see we'll say the upper cross section, because it's kind of the tougher scenario, because the lots along the eastern portion of the site are fairly level, but a little bit elevated from the site already. That from that sight line, it would from the second floor standpoint, we'd actually be looking through canopy of the existing vegetation that's out there. So so we feel that it would be obscured from that standpoint. Certainly something that we'll continue to analyze as we further develop the design.
If I can follow on.
Yeah, go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Those are mostly deciduous trees, so in the winter, they're going to lose their leaves. Does that impact the view?
It certainly does. I mean, it's not as though we have a dense evergreen buffer through there, but that's the intent of the additional supplemental evergreen buffer that's going to be placed on the inside of that that no cut buffer.
Okay. Thank you. I think that's it for my questions.
All right, thank you, Mr. Howard. Next.
So we have Robin Yonkin. Robin, if you could give your full name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Robin Yonkin, and I live at 49 West Passage Drive. Thank you for taking my comment. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
All right. To be honest, I really do not like the idea of a solar array right next to me, nor do I like what is happening in Portsmouth with the development of solar energy systems, as well as other less than desirable commercial ventures happening all over our town, particularly on the west side. I don't understand how anyone who cares about the town's future, beauty, charm, or livability could support or think that the expansion of solar arrays throughout Portsmouth does anything for the residents, to say nothing about the reputation of the town as a place of natural beauty and historic importance. If we do not act now, if we do not draw the line on what is acceptable in our town, then this type of development will continue. We do not have that much open space left, so shouldn't we be prudent about planning the way our town looks? I believe that the people who care about this town should prevent rampant development, despite what is often expressed about property owners, how they pay taxes, their rights, etc. Property owners cannot do whatever they want with their property. There are rules to prevent people from encroaching on neighbors' rights, including such minor issues as putting a shed on a lot or building a slight addition to a deck or a porch. I was actually at one meeting in which a chicken coop was denied because of the noise and nuisance it might cause to a neighbor. So you can imagine how the neighbors feel about a solar array. If a development adds to a community, improves the location or neighborhood, I'm all for it. Despite what anyone might think, I am not against green energy, for I believe that clean energy is required to save our planet. However, solar arrays and other power plant installments like it should be placed in appropriate locations, not on a wooded lot. which must be cleared of vegetation and trees. Wooded lands create their own green energy, clearer air, for instance, and they provide a habitat for deer, coyotes, hawks, osprey, bats, and other wildlife. Renewable energy projects should be located in appropriate places like brownfields, landfills, gravel pits, rooftops, and other developed areas. My property is located north of the proposed array and is incorrectly identified on the master plan map on page 4 as commercial. Much of the information provided about neighbors looks incorrect, as some of the people listed have not even lived in the area for years. There are other inconsistencies, so I'm wondering how much of the plan needs to be looked at more carefully and corrected. The plan very subtly suggests that there is more vegetation bordering the lot than there is, so it's deceptive. When the town council passed its ordinance in late fall or early winter, I can't remember when that happened, residents were told that there were no solar arrays in the works, despite my neighbors' concerns about this parcel of land and the plans which we knew already existed. Residents, including myself, argued that we should not have to take on the burden of protesting against plans presented by large companies every time something like this was proposed. Yet, here we are again. So as you consider the master plan for this proposed national grid power plant of 12.4 acres that borders a residential area, please keep the neighbors in mind. We need greater buffers between the array and homeowners in the area, particularly on the north end. We need more complete and faster growing evergreen growth than what is shown on the map. We need safeguards in place that the town will step up and make sure that the regulations, setbacks, buffers, and other safety features mentioned in the plan are enforced. And we need to know how the town will enforce the plan and what will be the penalty if regulations are not followed. With a rich company like National Grid, will it pay fines rather than adhere to the rules of the town? It's a question worthy of asking, as we know that this happened before in other communities. So please do what is right for everyone in our town, protect the natural resources that we have, and think of the whole town and what is best for everyone. And finally, I leave you with one question. I ask you, would you want a power plant next to your home? I think the answer is obvious. Of course not. Thank you.
Counselor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't think we have a in response.
Can't hear you. You're fading.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Chairman. I think we have presented a landscaping plan that is we're trying to be very conservative and have added extra plantings on the north side. I will also say the property is zoned commercial and light industrial. So it very likely could be developed in a much more, that would be have to add. Thank you.
Am I still on?
You are.
I couldn't hear hardly anything she said, so I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
well, I had trouble with it too, so you're not telling me.
I just think that some of the supplemental plantings are really small plants like hollies, which are, like 3 feet tall most of the time, or it takes them 50 years to grow. And I'm just wondering, whether if there could be maybe something that's a little bit more fast growing that could fill in spaces. And also the buffer on the north end does not seem that sufficient from my point of view anyway.
Counselor?
I don't think we have more to present than we have with our landscape architect.
Well, what about the nature of the plantings? Are these small plants? They're going to be large plants?
All right, Kevin.
People that have to wait 20 years
May
before it fills in?
persons respond to that, Mr. Chairman?
course.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Kevin Alverson again.
Thank you.
If we could scroll to the to page 1, I believe just to sort of clarify what the species are that we are proposing in those areas. There's a planting legend that's over on the side, and there are some shrub vegetation. If we could zoom in on that, that would be great.
Might have to move less. There you go.
Okay. So on that sheet, there's a planting legend, and it does identify some shrub vegetation as well as some understory tree vegetation, but also the larger evergreen tree vegetation that we're proposing. And although conceptual in nature still at this point, the intent is to provide a mixture of a buffer. I've always found that having a layered buffer is much more effective than being able to have just essentially a line of trees. One, it looks more natural, it's more in keeping with the natural forest habitat, but that mixture of vegetation allows for, even when the evergreen trees, which we are proposing along there, a mixture of pitch pine, white pine, eastern red cedar, white spruce, all trees that will get in the vicinity of 60 to 100 feet tall over time. And also we want to mix in a variety of trees that are faster growing and slower growing, so that there's this mixture of habitat through there. What we found is using some shrub vegetation, which may have been alluded to, that there's some ilex, which is a holly. It's an evergreen holly called inkberry. That's also a good pollinator plant. Those help to infill the understory of those larger evergreen trees. So as the larger evergreen trees grow and mature, particularly with some species like white pine, they tend to shade themselves out and the lower branches tend to go away. So we're trying to be cognizant of that and utilizing shrub vegetation in addition to that, so that it infills underneath the canopy or the upper parts of the vegetation. So although every tree is not completely spec'd out on this at the master plan level, that will be as we develop the design further. But the categories of plants that are listed in that planting legend are meant to be utilized in that manner. I hope that helps to clarify.
Mrs. Young? All right, she can go back if she wants to ask a question. Next on the list, Michael?
So we've got Bill. Bill, if you could state your name and address for the record.
William Com, 108 West Passage Drive.
Could you spell your last name?
I'm sorry?
Could you spell your last name?
K-O-M-M.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions about the site plan.
Sure, go ahead.
The LOD line, why is it closer to the property line than the tree cut line? It would seem to me if you can't cut past the tree cut line, why would you need to disturb anything past it?
Counselor?
May I please have Mr. Vardakis respond to that?
Sure, of course.
Thanks, Helen. Andrew Vardakis, Wood Environment and Infrastructure. Yeah, great question. That is more of a visual. Theoretically, the limit of disturbance is the tree cutting line. However, when you overlay both of those lines on top of each other, they're very hard to read. So essentially, they're separated just from a visual perspective to read the plan. So you're correct in thinking that the tree cutting limit is the limit of disturbance.
Okay, another question, is the tree cutting line have a vertical height to it? Or is it just at ground level that you cannot cut? For instance, if the trunk of a tree is outside the tree cut line, but there's a branch, especially with deciduous trees, the branches are going to extend quite a bit past the trunk. can you go up 10 feet and trim a branch that is past the tree cut line toward the array?
Counselor?
Mr. Bardakis?
I'm not sure I know the correct answer. I believe it's at ground level. The 50-foot buffer is at ground level, but I may have to defer to the board or someone else for that. I believe it's 50 feet horizontally at the ground level.
How about Mr. Alverson? Does he have an answer?
Mr. Carr does.
Oh, okay. Name and address.
My name is Steve Kerr. I live on Stimson Street in Middletown. The tree cut is at 50 feet. We're trying to keep the tops of the trees from shading the array. So if a branch sticks out sideways, it's not going to matter. We're trying to keep the tops from shading the array.
So you're saying you
Are you
can,
straight up, or are you just talking about the base of the trees?
Just the base of the trees.
I don't know if I helped you or harmed you.
Okay. We're not going to cut anything within that 50-foot limit. Any trunks that are within that 50-foot limit, we're not going to cut those trees.
Who's speaking, please?
My name is Steve Kerr.
All right. I don't know if that helped you, Mr. Cobb?
so I understand that you're not going to touch a tree whose trunk is outside the tree cut line,
Correct.
no matter how far the branch could overhang into the, toward the arrays.
Correct, except maybe on the north side, we would, because it would overhang the panels.
I don't think the branches would extend 50 feet. And the panels are even further away than 50 feet.
Not on the north edge, they're not.
Well, they have to be because you have a 50-foot setback. And the panels, that's 50 feet to the fence, and then the panels are even further away from the fence. So you're probably like 60 or 70 feet.
If the branch extends out over the array, we would cut it.
Okay, so the tree cut line definition is different on the north side.
Is there an answer to that?
Well, no, it's not. We're going to cut trees, the trunks of the trees. Anything within that 50-foot limit, we're not going to cut. If there's a branch overhanging a panel, we will cut it.
I thought you had agreed that you wouldn't touch a tree whose trunk was within the cut line.
If the branch overhangs a panel, we will cut the branch.
Is there any concern for the survival of a tree if excessive cutting is done on it?
Well, yeah, I don't know if Kevin can answer that question.
Could we please have Kevin Albertson answer that question, Mr. Chair?
Sure. This is Kevin Alverson again. I guess it's a case by case situation. Certainly, if the tree falls right on that line and there's a branch that's overhanging the panels, and what Mr. Kerr was referring to is particularly along the north, we have a 50-foot no cut area. But because we're not as concerned with shading that's coming from the north, that no cut buffer is closer to the array than it is on the east, south, and west sections of this. So depending on the health of the tree, if 2/3 of the tree needs to be cut, then that tree may not survive. But also included in our, but with that said, this is sort of the unicorn over here, because we would be site adjusting if necessary. So if the fence line needs to bump here or there just a little bit, those are site decisions that we can make. But built into this is that although it's a no cut buffer, if there are trees within that area that are near the array, and we specify this on the plans, that are a fall hazard for the protection of the arrays and also for the people who may be working on the array, those will need to be pruned and or or, kind of removed as necessary for that purpose. But the intent is certainly not to take out any trees that are, even right along that. We would prune it properly with a, certified horticulturist that would be able to prune it properly in a way that helps the tree heal as quickly as possible and minimize any sort of pathogens that can get into the tree. So our intent is to keep all of those trees as healthy as absolutely possible.
Okay, so you could trim some trees, but others you wouldn't. Like on the east side, you don't expect to trim any branches closer to the array.
That's correct. On the east and the west sides, as you can see, we have the 50-foot no-cut buffer. Say the trunk of the tree sits 1 foot outside of our, our project area, we'll call it, the limited disturbance. That tree may overhang into the project area, but it's overhanging in a way that's not near the array itself. And it would be kind of overhanging that limited clearing area, which we would have trees and shrubs and such up to 12 feet in height. So it would be just basically like a lower story forested habitat. So we don't see that being a concern along those areas, unless it's like some freak thing. But we don't anticipate any tree that would be along that would have a radius, we'll call it for that, for lack of a better term, that's over that width. It's just along that northern area where the the no-cut buffer is closer to the arrays that there may be some branches that would overhang, and those we would need to cut properly.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Khan?
That's it.
Okay. Next person.
Next first, we have Jen McGinley. Hold on a sec. So
Bear with us.
One an issue, letting you speak, because currently the Zoom tab isn't updated. I'm going to promote you to panelist for this.
I'm not so sure that's a promotion.
Hi, Jen, if you could just give your name and your address for the record.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
This is Tom McGinley. I live at 19 Chelsea Drive, so I'm in a butter directly to the south.
Go ahead, Mr. McGinley.
I have a few questions. The first one has to do with the no-cut area. And I thought I saw somewhere in the plan that there's the possibility that you might have to go in and cut out dead wood and things. Exactly how much of that no-cut buffer is really going to remain undisturbed? That's my first question.
All right, Counselor.
May I please have Mr. Alverson answer that?
Yeah, this is Kevin Alverson. The intent is to keep everything possible within that 50-foot buffer. The only I mentioned this in the last question as well, is that if there are trees that may be a fall hazard that are in those areas, if there's something that's smaller vegetation that's may be dead, we would just leave it in place. It's more a way for us to practically be able to selectively remove something that may be a danger to our site or your property for that matter, and also people that may be working within the facility. So it's dropping on the fence, things of that nature. So that's really the intent of that wording that's in the specifications on the plans. But practically speaking, we are planning to keep everything that we absolutely can within those areas. There's not going to be any sort of clearing of vegetation just for that sake.
Okay, thank you. Another question, when I look at some of the landscaping plan where you have some of the additional plantings, there are some gaps here and there. Is this meant just to be sort of notional as far as covering sight lines? And if so, who gets to sort of decide what's adequate when it comes to the actual plantings?
Yeah, so this is Kevin Alverson again. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to overstep, attorney.
That's Mr. Alverson.
Okay. So yes, there are some spotted areas through there. The intent is that we would be planting as necessary to block any and all sight lines from the abutting residences along, well, all around the site, really. But for example, there may be, you know, a tree here or there that we would need to sort of adjust the tree to make sure that it's providing the maximum amount of buffering for it. So I had mentioned earlier in my presentation that with these sites, and we've done a number of them at this point, we design to the best extent practical on paper. But when it comes down to it, we have our parameters that we want to fulfill, and we have to adjust trees and add trees as needed in certain situations to make sure that maybe there's a sight line that we didn't anticipate until, you know, we really get into building the stormwater basins, the berms, whatever might need to happen. And then we will be adjusting on site to be able to meet those. And I'm sure that, you know, if there are particular sight lines that even we miss, we'd be open to be able to work with, you know, with the direct abutters to make sure that we're being cognizant of those things, you know, throughout the process.
Okay, thank you. I guess another question I wanted to ask, when you look at the elevation plan from the southern side, which I think is the bottom one.
The cross sections?
Cross section, yeah. So one thing is, I guess because we have these stormwater basins, there won't be that buffer area of lower level vegetation. Is that correct?
That's where the basins are. That's correct. We would have our 50-foot no cut buffer, and then we would have that supplemental planted area, you know, for the 15 to 20 to 30 feet inside of that no cut buffer. That would be bermed and planted with, you know, fully evergreen vegetation trees is what the intent is there.
Do you know how high the berm will be?
It varies, but this is sort of a typical, and I believe these are 1 foot, so it's about 4 feet or so. Four. I think it's about, it varies, and certainly as we develop it, we'll have better, more defined answer on that. But this particular cross section I took through is probably about 4 feet tall.
Okay, I get, you know, as the abutter there, of course, I think the higher the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
But another thing, I guess I noticed when if I'm reading the elevation on the map correctly, this lot slopes up as you go to the north and the east. So when you're looking at our sight line, particularly when we talk about like from the second story, we have to also, just a comment I have, take into account that increase. I think there's about a 25 foot increase in elevation. Like from example, you know, from my backyard up to
Yes.
the northeast corner of the arrays. I don't know if that's been
Plans correctly, it's more than that.
Yeah, that is correct. There is it does go uphill as you go from there. So the supplemental trees that we're proposing in that area, you know, although we haven't really established full on what the, you know, installation heights and things are. We're working through that detail right now, but the mature heights of those trees will be in that 60 to 70 foot range, but also using faster growing trees in that area. And as I mentioned before, some of those faster growing trees are something like a white pine, which will have, you know, they grow a lot faster. They're very thick when they first grow in, but as they mature, they start to lose some of their lower branches, which is the intent of having this layered buffer where we have the vegetation that'll get up to that, you know, 10-foot height as the understory, and then you'll have the taller vegetation that grows. White pines, after their second or third year growth, can probably grow anywhere from 24 to 30 inches a year in a good year. and they'll reach at a, a height of 60 to 80 feet.
Okay, thanks. When it comes to those stormwater basins, do we anticipate that those are filled with water all of the time? And what impact does that have for those of us that have wells right along the property line to the south? Do we know what that might be?
Mr. Chairman, may I have Mr. Bardakis answer that question?
Absolutely.
Yep, thank you, Andrew Vardakis, civil engineer from Wood. Yeah, that's what we're currently evaluating, as I mentioned before, with the final stormwater calculations and soil inspections. So we want to evaluate the on-site soils in those exact locations. Right now, we have some old existing data we've looked at. We have online mapping we've looked at, but we want to get out there and see to confirm the soils are in fact true what we have for historic data and mapping. But to answer your question, it depends on the type of system. There's a couple systems that are designed to infiltrate. They're infiltration basins. That's usually with a better, a sandier type A or B type soil, which infiltrates the water. And there's other types of design systems that are detention basins that are designed to hold water, and then have an outlet basin with some sort of riprap or piping or flow control that controls the flow over the top of a berm. So as I mentioned, we haven't finalized the design yet, but we don't anticipate impacts to wells or to abutters, whether in groundwater or surface water, but that's all being finalized right now.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like there's still some issues to be determined.
Yeah, I think it's important for the public to know what this stage is. This is the master plan stage, which is really sort of a, if the approval is granted, it's for the project aspirationally, if you will. And that they're going to have to come back later with very, very detailed plans. You don't have them do all of the engineering and all of that detailed stuff unless they know that they have some guarantee that the project will go forward. So a lot of the details that are being discussed today are something that we're going to be revisiting at a later time.
The input's valuable.
Absolutely. No, I'm not saying it's not. It's good for the developer partner. But it's important for them to know that the reason what they're saying is, we don't have all these details figured out yet because they just haven't gotten that far. Next person.
Well, I just had one more quick question, if I may.
Go ahead, Mr. Moon.
If I remember right from the preliminary plan that we saw in January, the buffers, including the no cut, extended about 150 feet, and it looks like now they're like 130. Can you confirm if that's the case, and if so, why?
Counselor?
Yes, may I please have Mr. handle that question? Or Mr. Vardakis? We'll take Mr. Vardakis first.
Andrew Vardakis, civil engineer from Wood. Yes, I don't have that that plan in front of me right now. Those, again, that was the pre-application stage where those drawings were very preliminary. So it's very possible those may have shifted 10 feet here or there, but the intent was to have that greater distance from the property line to the fence line in that 130, 150 foot range. But I can't speak to certainty. I apologize. I don't have that plan in front of me at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next person.
Lark, if you could give your name and address, please.
Lark Roderick, 73.
I can't hear you.
Lark Roderick, 73 Ridge Drive. Can you hear me?
Did you get that, Dee Dee?
I did not, but I do have Roderick's from other minutes.
That is.
I know who she is.
Okay. Hopefully we can hear you.
Okay. Let me know if you can hear me once I start to talk, please. So from the get-go, this proposed solar development has impacted not only me, but the entire neighborhood.
Yeah, it's completely muffled.
It
I
is,
I can't really understand what you're saying.
all right. I'm going to sign out and sign back in. Maybe I could be put.
Okay, we'll be here for a while.
Thanks a lot.
Not a problem. When Michael sees you pop on again, he'll put you to the beginning of the queue.
Yeah, just raise your hand again when you come back on.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, next.
We have Bruce Fay. Bruce, if you could, give your name and your address for the record.
Yes, hello. My name is Bruce Fay, F-A-Y, excuse me, and I live at 84 Sweet Farm Road. And I had a couple of questions here. Number one, back, I don't know, 40 minutes ago, whatever it was, we started talking about the appendix and the various items that had been addressed. What I heard Mr. Vardakis say was, and at least I'm pretty sure I heard this correctly. I forget exactly what item number, but he said no pesticides, no herbicides. But that's not what the appendix says. The appendix says it'll be minimized. Now, obviously, the concern with that is any pesticide or herbicide going into water runoff that then winds up in the storm drains. And that's a concern for anybody that perhaps has a well on the south side of any of that.
Hang on one second. You remember what you're referring to specifically, sir?
It was one of the items in the appendix that we talked about at the outset of the meeting at probably 10 after 8 or so, 10 after 7 or so. So it's a good hour ago that we talked about this.
Hang on. I assume you're talking about what is Appendix F?
I believe that is correct.
Well, see what it says. You can help out too, Counselor.
Yes, I would be happy to help out. I will say that I don't have it in front of me either. I'm trying to pull it up as we speak, but I will speak on behalf of the developers. They have no plans to use any pesticides or herbicides. So if we need to amend that report to say that, we will.
It's number 16.
That.
And what the use.
Does say minimize.
There are notes in the plans that call for splitting these fertilizers.
Yeah, fertilizer is different than herbicide. Mr. Fay? What happened with Mr. Fay?
I'm listening.
Oh, okay, I just want to be sure that you're still there. Did you hear what they said?
I did not.
Go ahead, Counselor.
Yes, Mr. Fay, can you hear me? This is Helen Anthony, the attorney.
Yes.
Yes, I don't know where you're referring, but I will say if it's there, we will amend it to say we will not allow any pesticides or herbicides because it is
okay.
Plan. So I'm looking for where you're referring, and if I find it, I will ask to have
I
that.
know exactly where it is. It's attachment F, number 16.
Okay, second question. Has there been an environmental impact study done of that property? Given that 40 years ago, it was a junkyard whose owner went to prison? I mean, those of us who are abutters, we have found things even in our backyards for years that we were convinced should never be there. Truck rear ends, nobody even knows what was put into the ground for liquids, hazardous materials like oils, gasoline, that kind of stuff. And those are things that ought to be considered before we start making holes in the ground and having water runoff into storm drains.
Counselor.
Yes, I can have Scott Milne speak to
Scott Milnes, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Scott Milnes from Bartlett Road, Middletown, Rhode Island. The site, besides the basins, like Drew said earlier, the disturbance is going to be minimal to the site. We're not regrading. We're not really doing much site disturbance. We're not foundations. There'll be a couple pads for the transformers, and everything else is pile-driven posts. So that the disturbance on the site is going to be very minimal, where we would unearth any, stuff that's been under the ground. As far as any kind of studies that DM would require, would do this for us. So I don't know if that helps.
Okay,
I just want to make sure.
Has there been an environmental impact study? And the answer, I suspect, is no.
No.
And that's because the regulators haven't required.
Correct.
Correct.
Mr. Fay, you still there?
Yeah, I am. I have just one last question. And this won't be the last time this comes up. Who exactly is the legal authority that is responsible for ensuring compliance to all of these plans?
Zoning enforcement office.
Well, we know preliminarily it is the zoning, the planning, what was it called? Zoning enforcement officer here in the town is one of them, and I assume that there are other authorities that deal with the electrical grid, but Counselor can address those.
Yes, Mr. Fay, yes, Mr. Chairman, I would be zoning enforcement, to make sure that the plans are being done, but built according to the plans that are submitted. But I would also say there will be, other plans presented further on in the process, operation and maintenance plan. Those will all be part of the record. So there'll be quite a bit of documentation to refer to. But I would think that, I don't want to speak for the town, but there will be a lot of documentation that says exactly what's going to be happening. And if that doesn't happen, I would think it would be the zoning officer who would probably identify that and take action.
All right, I guess that's good enough for now. That will be brought up again. And the reason I bring this up is that there have been many things that were requirements that no inspections or enforcement was ever seen to. And this kind of thing impacts all of us. So, and it's not a question of, do I trust the developer and the builders, but there are many, many hands in the pie, and somebody needs to be responsible directly for doing inspections periodically at non-predetermined intervals, doing this to make sure that this long-term impact to the town of Portsmouth and its residents is adhered to. And it's not just the Sweet Farm, Muriel and then West Passage people we're talking about. We're talking about the entire town of Portsmouth and what seems to be the proliferation of solar farms, because we can't seem to figure out what else to do with the land.
Okay, anything else, Mr. Fay?
No, that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Next, did Lark come back?
Yep, Lark is that. Lark? Your name again? Oh, sorry, I just muted you by accident.
Poor Lark. Can't win. Can't catch a break. Are you back?
Can you hear me?
Oh, it's not any better.
Now, how about now?
Speak a little more.
All right.
A little better. You want to give it a try?
All right, I'm going to try my phone.
So you're going to come back again?
I'll try again.
Okay.
Better now.
It is a little better now, yeah.
Mark, you want to try it again?
It's the call line.
She's gonna call on her phone.
So let's go with Julie Monaco. Julie, if you could give your name and your address for the record.
My name is Julie Munifo. I'm from Jamestown.
Go ahead.
Okay, I know in other municipalities, it's been difficult when a site like this has been contaminated with, like, whether it's a landfill or simply contaminated land. And people are not just marching up and putting solar farms on these sites. My question is, has the developer done any preliminary testing? I know that they think they're impacting this field minimally, but what do they do if they hit rock? Will they need to blast? Have they tested to see if any of these sites where they might have to blast, is there like groundwater that could carry the contaminants further, upset things and can carry the contaminants further down the road into residents' wells?
First off, I don't think you're blasting, but I'll let the counselor address it.
Yes, I'd like to have,
Can I jump in, Helen?
sure, I'll let,
Capital Equinox. These galvanized posts are driven into the ground and there's no blasting.
Please.
Hello?
Name.
Scott Milnes.
All right.
These posts are driven into the ground and no blasting is done. If ledge was hit or rock was hit, they would drill the rock, or they can do a foundation at the post. But they're pile driven to about a 6 foot embedment into the ground. So there is no blasting required on any of these sites. We've probably built 40 sites throughout Rhode Island, from smaller ones to bigger ones, and we've never had to blast a site. Does that help?
That is helpful. That is helpful. I guess, have you done testing? That was my initial question, I guess.
When the site's cleared, our racking installer would do a pull test at the site to determine the depth of the drive and what the soils are like. And also Wood Engineering is going to do some soil testing, which will let us know what the soils are like on the site. But a site like this is probably not a ledgy site where we'd have to do any kind of different methods besides driving the posts into the ground.
Why wouldn't you do the testing while it was still in the stage of being a proposal? I would think that this would be significant impact on the neighborhood if you were to discover anything once you're into the project.
Well, the site's wooded now. The only test we're going to do is what's required for DEM, and we don't want to clear the site to do any extensive tests on the site. But the test, Wood will do tests which will shed light on the site. But regardless of what's on the site, we have a way to put these posts in the ground that won't require any blasting or any removing of any site disturbance.
Okay. I did have one other question.
Okay.
In other solar facilities that have been proposals have been approved, sometimes the trees fail. Are they going to be guaranteeing the trees planted within the buffer zone, or they just be planted and left? But what do they do if in the case of a stand of trees failing?
I can answer that.
And you are?
Scott Milnes, sorry.
Right.
It would be a operation and maintenance plan, submitted with the town that we'd have to follow as far as the operations and the maintenance of the project. And in that plan would be the part of that plan would be the trees to make sure that they're maintained and kept the way they're supposed to be.
And if they were to die?
They'd have to be replaced. That would be referenced in the operation and maintenance plan.
Okay, thank you.
Is Lark back? Not yet.
Let's see. And Azor, M. Azor, if you could give your name and your address for the record, please.
My name is Jesse McHugh, 48 Sweet Farm Road.
Go ahead, sir.
Well, my question is, before we start digging and clearing, the consideration for what's under the ground. I know that it's been stated multiple times that it's only 6 feet deep, pile drived, galvanized steel, but that junkyard was there a long time, and a good way to get rid of oil barrels is to bury them. And I've been back there a lot, and I know that there's, like other people have stated, things sticking up everywhere. Bumpers, rear ends. I found an entire Volkswagen in my backyard. What are we going to do when we get a quarter of the way through this project and we find that the owner 40 years ago was burying, antifreeze barrels underneath the property, which is, not inconceivable at any extent.
Counselor?
Scott Melns, Equinox. On every project that we've done at a scale like this, for financing for the project, we'd be required to do a phase 1 environmental study. Usually we use Sage Engineering. So that would be done during the process. And they would walk the site and they would look at the site and determine if they, found anything.
Is there a reclamation bond put on the site before you guys begin digging? I'm in the mining industry, by the way.
No, we wouldn't be required to unless something was triggered with the phase 1 environmental study.
Okay. So there won't be any subterranean survey done. You guys are just kind of shoot for it.
No, they would walk the site, they'd look at the site, and they typically do it on these sites. And if they found anything or, issues, they would report them, and it would be they would put a report together that would address it.
So there's not going to be any subterranean verification of what's under there.
No, we're not. I mean, we're not going to open up a site and start digging underground to find stuff that we don't know is there. We'll do a visual, and we're not going to be excavating the site, and we're not going to be stripping. But basically, what we're doing to the site is minimal ground disturbance. So we're not going to open up a site to try to find something that we don't know is there.
Right. How many of the galvanized rods are being pounded in? Just ballpark.
I'd have to think about that one. I'm not sure offhand. It's a lot of posts.
It's a lot of posts.
What's a lot?
It's probably.
I'm not going to hold you to it, just the ballpark.
Yeah, just a generalization would be.
I would say there's posts on those rows. There's posts probably every 10 or 15 feet. So look at the rows. There's probably maybe 8 or 10 per row, and it increases as you go.
So with no reclamation bond in end, let's say that something does go awry halfway through construction on the southwest quadrant, we hit something that's not supposed to be there because the former owner didn't want to burn his oil, he buried it. What happens with the site and the town and the people who live around it? All water is going to go through that right towards the elementary school.
Right. Again, it's unknowns, and if we hit something like that, like standard construction practices, we'd stop, and obviously we'd have to report it, and we wouldn't continue. But again, we're driving posts into the ground, so if something happened, it would be reported, the project was stopped, and then we'd look at the problem. But we can't assume we're going to find a problem until we find it.
But we can check before we start the project, yes?
Again, we'll do a phase 1 environmental study, which will look at the site and let us know if they see anything that sticks out to them.
Okay. So that's, I mean, honestly, I don't dislike the solar farm. I'm kind of okay with it. But as far as contracts go, I wouldn't sign this ever. There's so many good intentions, and we're going to figure that out. I have 2 mines in Arizona that I own and operate, and I couldn't touch the ground with this kind of contract. So that's more of a statement than a question. But if we're going to drive 200 to 300 galvanized poles into the ground, I've got to know what's underneath the ground before I start pile driving them in, especially since I'm bringing in trucks. to pile those in that are going to be at minimum a 2.5 to 3.5 ton truck. So that's my only statement.
Counselor?
I have nothing to say, Mr. Chairman. We are required to do conservation. It would be prohibitively expensive for us to do that, and we are following the environmental requirements.
Next, we have a Bill. Bill, if you could state your name and your address for the record.
William Com, KOM, 108 West Passage Drive. I'm a return questionnaire.
Good to hear from you.
I'm a curious person. I come up with questions all the time. Has the inverter locations been determined for the 42 inverters? I'm more concerned about the sound that they will be generating.
Scott Melons, inverter locations would be spread along the racks. The inverters, when they're running, they're at about 50 decibels at about 15 to 20 feet, which is the fence line. So they're pretty much, when you get past the fence line, it becomes inaudible. So you won't hear it, and they're spread out through the array. We use string inverters on this site, so there are probably 60 kilowatt inverters that are spread throughout the array.
Okay. Has anyone looked at the glare potential? I'm just thinking more as the sun sets in the west, you would have a glare potential on the east side homes.
Yeah, Scott Mills, the solar panels, they don't do a glare, they absorb the sun. There's projects that are built all around airports, in Denver, they built a solar project around the airport, so it's typically not a concern for glare because they actually absorb.
So they're very lousy mirrors, you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, my last question is regarding the retention ponds. As Mr. Howard stated earlier, a developer near my house put in a rainwater retention pond illegally, and it holds water for a long time. And when we were concerned about mosquito larvae, I went down to the Department of Public Works and they gave me some larvicide. I don't know if you expect the adjoiners to be doing that type of thing with your ponds, or do you have a plan for dealing with mosquito risk with the retention ponds?
I think that part of the design, Scott Melons, that part of the design is being worked on with wood environment, with wood and the DM submittal they'll be doing. So that's not finalized, but I don't really have an answer for that at this point.
I know when Triple E flares up in West Nile, people get nervous about mosquitoes in their neighborhood, justifiably so. And hopefully there'd be something in the maintenance plan or something to mitigate that risk.
Yep.
All set, Mr. Cobb?
I'm all set, yes.
All right, is Ms. Lark back?
No.
Oh, that's too bad.
We have Shelley Nicholas. Shelley, if you could give your name and address for the record.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. Yes, my name is Shelley Nicholas, and I live at 59 Merritt Rose Drive. Thank you. So I'd like to know, how do you determine setbacks on each side of the design?
I didn't catch that.
How did you determine setbacks on each side of the design?
Didn't get the beginning of it. I understand it's about setbacks. But what's the first part of the question? I'm sorry.
How were the setbacks determined on each side?
Counselor.
Yes, Ms. Nichols, there are certain setback requirements set forth in the solar ordinance, and I can let Mr. Vardakis expound on that.
Thanks, Counselor. Andrew Vardakis, civil engineer from Wood. Yes, if I understand the question correctly about setbacks, as Ms. Anthony stated, the setbacks are determined in the zoning ordinance, so we follow those as required by the town. But I'm wondering if there's a separate question about setbacks for the solar design. And I don't want to speak for the applicant, but essentially the applicant looks at tree heights and tree shading in terms of clearing limits. So that's why you can see more tree clearing to the east, south, and west. That's where the shading is coming from the trees. And then there's less tree clearing to the north because there's less tree shading on the northern side. So I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question correctly, but those are my two answers on setbacks.
Thank you. Kind of as you're alluding to, yeah, I think it would be equitable to offer similar setbacks for all neighbors who are abutting, considering that north, east, and south, it's all residential. So basically what I would be asking for is consistent setbacks for all residential abutters. Additionally, Kevin mentioned that you would have a process in place to adjust sightlines for buffering once the development was occurring. What would that process actually entail?
May I please have Mr. Alverson answer that?
Sure.
Sure. This is Kevin Alverson. Thank you for the question. I guess the short answer is the full-on process is still in the development stage as far as how the different factors that might trigger or might be required as part of any approvals. But what in a typical standpoint, what we would do is throughout the construction, I usually am involved with reviewing the staked out, laid out limit of disturbance around the facility as tree clearing is occurring. If there are certain larger trees that we may want to make sure that we're saving, we may adjust the limit of disturbance slightly here or there out of just good practice to be able to maximize our buffering and also minimize any clearing that is required outside of it. And also sort of finding some significant tree species that are there, which would allow us to then adjust the locations of the trees and take a step back, for lack of a better term, and look into the site and start looking at particular site angles that may be from abutting residences, from public roadways. So it's very much a hands-on, as you can imagine. We're called landscape architects, but it's a little bit more of an on-site sort of position when it comes to landscape architecture, due to the nature of the natural condition out there and exactly where every single tree is. So we'll be working through what the triggers are when it may come to any sort of approvals, certainly as we further develop the design. But that in a nutshell is how we find is most effective to be able to buffer these facilities. Put the larger tree where we need it for height issues coming from different areas. The smaller one might be able to slide down a little bit further, things of that nature. So it's sort of an hands-on site evaluation by my office or colleagues of mine as well.
Are you going to seek input from the abutters?
I don't want to speak for the developer offhand, but I'm sure that we're willing to do that. We want to be able to have a good relationship with the abutting neighborhood and be good neighbors. And it's in our best interest to make sure that this is an effective facility from the solar collection standpoint, but also as a good neighbor to the abutters around us. So it's certainly something that we'd be open to further discussion on as we further the design.
Mr. Chairman, if I may add something.
Certainly.
This is Helen Anthony. I just will say, yes, neighbors have reached out to, and Mr. Melns can testify to this, but there have been neighbors that have been reaching out, and yes, we are having he is having conversations with them to discuss their concerns and adding buffering.
Anything else, Ms. Nichols?
Yes, thank you, Kevin. I'd like to clarify my question. Earlier in your presentation, you mentioned abutters could work with you directly during development to address additional buffering requirements. I would like to know what that specific process will entail. For example, if as tree clearing happens and the panels are going up and I can visibly see every single thing that's happening from my property line, who do I call and what will the process look like to get additional buffering in place?
Yes, I'll have Mr. Milnes speak to that.
I think once after we get to the final stage and, we get permits in hand and we clear the site with Kevin, we could definitely invite some neighbors out to, walk the limits of disturbance line to look in toward their places to have a look and talk to Kevin, went out against, conversations happening. We're not going to know until we cut to that tree line, because you can't really walk the site right now and get in the site because it's pretty heavy in there. So once we got to that point, we would definitely be agreeable to meet with Kevin and neighbors to look at some of the view corridors.
Ms. Nicholas?
Thank you very much. Last question. So as Dave Howard mentioned earlier, most of the trees on the site are deciduous, meaning that even with a 50-foot no-cut buffer and the supplemental shrubbery that might be planted at the end of the cul-de-sac for Mariel Rose Drive, I'm fairly confident that we'll be able to see the panels from our property. And what I'm requesting is you consider privacy slats within the chain link fence to provide some additional coverage. And that was my last comment. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
You want to address that, Council?
Scott Melns, we could look at that option. Sometimes the privacy slots, aren't attractive versus doing the buffer. So we could definitely look at options like that.
We have a phone call in here. It's 401-481-1094. If you could please state your name and your address for the record. Yes. 401-481-1094.
Is that Ms. Ward?
I don't know. If you would dial, I think it's dial.
Okay.
Oh, here we go.
Are you hearing me? Louis Latender, 94 Sweet Farm Road.
Let's start again. We didn't get that.
Okay. Louis Latender, 94 Sweet Farm Road, Portsmouth, Rhode Island.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. So I've been here for many years, 32 years. And like many of my neighbors, we've seen things in our backyards like chassis and hubcaps and lots of, we know it was a junkyard and there's lots of parts back there. So the question's coming up about the type of equipment that is going to be used and the pylons that you're going to use or the pile drivers that you're going to be using. I think how many actual solar panels will be going up at this farm? Can someone answer that?
So there's a whole bunch of questions in there, but Counselor?
Okay, how many panels are they going to be?
All right, we can start with that. Counselor.
Yes, Mr. Vardakis?
Andrew Vardakis, civil engineer, wood, environment, and infrastructure. Yeah, right now the preliminary solar design has 7,520 solar PV modules.
Okay, and each of those modules will have a driver of some sort. Is that correct?
Scott Milnes, Equinox. No, the modules sit on racks and the posts are every, I think, 10 or 15 feet. They'll be posts. So there's horizontal racking with the posts every 10 or 15 feet.
Okay. All right. So, what type of equipment are you putting over this property to clear the land? Is it heavy equipment? Is it bulldozers? I'm just trying to figure out what we're going to be seeing back there, and what's going to happen to the earth underneath it.
Scott Milnes, again, the idea we're leaving the existing grades and working with the existing grades inside the fenced-in area. We're going to be, cutting the trees and pulling the stumps out. So there'll be some equipment, to remove, cut the trees, remove the trees and pull the stumps out and clean up the site in the middle. So there will be work inside the fenced-in area. Outside the fenced-in area, besides the ponds, there won't be work done.
Right. But the reason I bring that up, and believe me, I'm very pleased to. I'm very pro solar, but I think what we've seen in the neighborhood, in just where Mr. Combe lives off of West Passage Street, is a lot of problems with runoff. And with that type of equipment, heavy equipment, you're going to see some runoff. And I think there's going to be some mud problems. And I think that we don't really know what's underneath, since there has not been an environmental study. Because of that, could the town require an environmental study just to see what's in the what's underneath that soil?
It's not required in our ordinance, nor is it required by the state, I think. I could be wrong on that.
And why don't you?
Hang on, let them address the other issues.
Sure, thank you.
I guess not.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was that for me?
No. Yeah,
Scott Milnes, Equinox, we would do a phase 1 environmental, and we'd be happy to share it with the town once it's complete. So.
I think that would be great, and I think it would put a lot of people at ease, because I think that many of the people on this call that I think are pro solar, and I know several people have them on their houses, and it seems to be the wave of the future. Yet we've had problems, with soil and in the neighborhood, and just want to make sure we're not going to have problems down the road. Just one other concern for my wife and myself, I guess a little selfish, thinking about sight lines and what we're going to be looking at. And there's been several questions about the type of trees. Is it possible that we would see an evergreen tree, so we wouldn't be looking at arborvitae, that type of a tree, to maybe, so we were not looking at the solar panels? Because 50 feet of no cut doesn't really, it's right very close to my fence line. I'm on 94. I think I'm the first property on the corner there. So in some of those, the trees that are there right now are dead. So you probably remove some of those. But just that question, is it possible that we could see, evergreens?
Mr. Alverson.
Yes, this is Kevin Alverson. Yes, I guess the quick answer to your question is yes. We're focusing use of evergreen trees, and we call out a number of them on that plan, although the specifics of it will be determined as we move a little further along. We've called out some types of eastern red cedar, native evergreen trees in particular around there. and wherever it abuts residential properties in particular. But I also can say that we would certainly be open as long as it's not a a plant that may be noted by the state as something on the invasive list or something of that nature. So for example, like the arborvitaes you had mentioned, the the native arborvitae for this area is actually a little bit prone to deer damage. So I would probably lean towards more what we call a naturalized tree, which is more of a Western arborvitae. Like you may have heard something like a green giant or something of that nature. Right
Yeah.
now, we don't name that plant on the plans, but we're certainly open to, as we further the design to placing some specific trees, particularly if this is something that, you guys would be looking at. You might want to look at something you like. So.
Okay, well, great. Well, listen, I just wanted to say thank you, and thank you to the town for letting us speak tonight, and to you, sir, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
You want to speak, Counselor?
Yes, there's a little question and answer section, and I guess Lark is on Robin Yowkin's line. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yes.
Michael does.
Yeah.
I don't, but Michael does.
Okay, so Robin's phone or Robin's account, is this Mark?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I had to run down the hill so that I could actually be able to do this. So here I am. Okay. I have just a bit of a comment and then a couple questions if you don't mind.
Sure.
So from the get-go, this proposal solar farm development has impacted not only me, but the entire neighborhood. We had to keep constant watch as the plan bounced from meeting to meeting. Some were not advertised. Some meetings were taken over by Lujaldi, an owner of the property where the proposed site rights to development as he sees fit. I have several concerns about Portsmouth allowing such a large solar development in a residential neighborhood, literally in people's backyards. Issues such as months, if not years, of unsettled destruction, from clear-cutting woodland and displacing wildlife, to drilling, blasting, disrupting, contaminating soil, runoff down the hill towards wetland and children's playgrounds at Melville. And if any tests have been done on all these issues, and if solar glare tests have been done, and if a fire has break out in Portsmouth, do we have a plan to deal with something this large so close to people's home? And what will they use to keep the foliage down around the panels? There are so many unknowns, and even today we've heard that there are unknowns from them also. What we know for sure is that our property will be affected, property values. How could a huge industrial site not affect not only property values, but so much more that we value with our homes? I live on the north side, which is shown on the map with a 50-foot setback. 50 feet is 16.6 yards, or to give you a better visual, 3 average cars nose to nose. I've lived in Portsmouth my whole life, and never in my wildest dreams did I think Portsmouth would allow an industrial park out my window. I have more faith in Portsmouth than that, especially 50 feet from my window. I do not plan on giving up my home or the small parcel I bought so it could remain farmland. I'm asking you to consider the setbacks. And I ask you, would you want to be 3 car lengths away from a huge industrial solar site? Larger setbacks are required. We were told when the solar ordinance was done that we would revisit the setbacks. Now we're being told that they're following the setbacks. I just am concerned that because it says 50 feet and they're doing it, that it won't be much of a setback at all. And I appreciate your time. And they did mention that they wanted to work with the abutters. Well, here's your opportunity. Step up and listen to one of the people that are going to be a neighbor. You say you want to be neighborly, show that you are willing to cooperate. Thank you very much.
You want to respond to that, Council?
I don't think so. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
A lot of work.
David Howard, if you could, again, state your name and your address for the record.
I'm David Howard. I'm at 36 Mariel Rose Drive. And I have one question and one comment. The question is, I appear to have an earlier version of the plan, but in that version, as part of the landscaping plan, it said that up to 1,500 pounds of fertilizer per acre and 1 to 3 tons of lime per acre could be applied. Now, with all this discussion of runoff, and we heard Monday at the town meeting or the town council meeting, how precarious things are at Melville Ponds. Doesn't that seem a bit excessive? I have a half an acre and I never put anywhere near that proportion in. So that's my question, is whether that's an intent or not.
Yeah, we just went through that a little bit earlier, but we'll have them address it again. Now,
Yes.
Equinox, again, we don't plan on doing any of the things that you are mentioning, and I don't recall seeing that much, fertilizers or anything going on the site, but we agreed that we wouldn't do it, and it would be on the O&M plan of what we will do, so.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
No problem, Mr. Howard.
Yes, my comment is that, from a town standpoint and from a neighborhood standpoint, this probably wouldn't be anywhere near contentious if the Navy hadn't put in the solar array that they did with 0 setbacks and apparently 0 landscaping around it. That gives everybody a real good idea of how ugly things can get. And I'm hoping that because the Navy is planning on putting more arrays in, that the town gets more proactive with them and asks them to consider their neighbors when they put in the next arrays. And that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Michael?
No one else on there right now.
Nobody else? All right. Counselor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I am just finished by saying that we believe we have the requirement for master plan approval and the requirement that we can right now for the solar energy system zoning ordinance as per your approval of the master plan.
Does anybody have any questions of the applicant from the board? All right, what's the pleasure of the board?
This is Ryan. I can make a motion.
Go ahead, Mr. Tibbetts.
I'll make a motion to approve the master plan application with some provisions that we should document. I'll go through. First one, I definitely incorporating the design review board recommendations, and I think we said entering that into the record as exhibit 1. I would add provision on the RIPD's permitting with the stormwater controls to the 100-year storm. Related to the concerns and language on pesticides, herbicides, redacting plans to use pesticides, herbicides from Appendix F, that was number 16. Provision on the O&M plan, just ensuring that that includes maintenance or replacement relative to trees that are dying. I'd maybe add the incorporation of language there on pesticides, herbicides over the long term. And The petitioner, the applicant mentioned sharing the phase 1 environmental survey, so throw that in there. I think those are, there's a lot said there, obviously. I think those are the highlights of what I captured.
Well, I'd second that.
There is a motion and a second. Anybody have any other comments? All right, I will call for a vote. Orally. Get my list. Mr. Harding.
Aye.
Mr. Lopes.
Aye.
Ms. Wilson. Lost Ms. Wilson.
That's good. That's good. Thumbs up.
Thumbs up from Ms. Wilson.
Yeah.
Palat.
Aye.
Mr. Garceau.
I think it was muted.
Aye.
Okay.
And, who am I missing? Mr. Tibbetts, you're right. Mr. Tibbetts.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Ayes have it. There are no dissents. All right, we're finished with item number 3. Item number 4. Applicant West Main Solar 2. Regal LLC, location AP 30 Lot 8, West Main Road, just south of Lehigh Terrace. Request for advisory opinion. That's still you, Counselor?
I'm still here, Mr. Chair. Would you like me to go through my name and address and everything for the record?
Not if I can't hear you.
Oh. Oh, no. Okay. All right. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. All right. So again, my name is Helen Anthony. I'm the attorney from Handy Law LLC. I'm here on behalf of West Main Solar 2 with regard to the development plan review for a 3.16 megawatt ground mounted solar project, property located on West Main Road, about 0.01 miles south of Lehigh Terrace, Assessor's Plat 30, Lot 8, property is owned by Regal LLC. This 24-acre site is zoned E20. The total development area is 7.5 acres, which is 31% of the site. Pursuant to the Solar Energy Systems Ordinance number 2020-12-14, the proposed solar energy system is allowed to be developed on Plat 30, Lot 8, with the approval of a special permit. The Planning Board and the Design Review Board in the advisory capacity to the Zoning Board of Review. So tonight, the applicant is asking the Planning Board to submit a recommendation of approval of a special permit to the Zoning Board. So I'm here again with the team, Scott Milnes and Steve Kerr of West Main Solar 1 LLC, the developer, Andrew Vardakis and Dean Haggerty of Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions, Inc., who are the engineers, and Kevin Alverson from Landscape Architect to present this project and answer your questions and those of the public. In your packet, you have the master plan application for major land development with attachments and the report from the Design Review Board. By way of background, the project was originally presented to the Planning Board at a pre-app meeting on January 13, 2020, and the Design Review Board on March 16, 2020. The applicant intends to incorporate the recommendations made by the Design Review Board. So again, I'd like to introduce Andrew Vardakis of Environment and Infrastructure Solutions to review the plans with you and detail how this project applies the requirements.
Thanks, Counselor. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. Thank you. Andrew Vardakis, civil engineer, Wood Environment and Infrastructure Solutions. I'm a licensed civil engineer to practice in the state of Rhode Island. Wood has offices at 275 Promenade Street in Providence. and 271 Mill Road in Taunton, Massachusetts. So again, very similar to the previous project, we have West Main Solar 2. Wood went out and did the property survey, topo survey, and the wetlands delineation. So what has changed here since we last met is the wetland delineation line. So on this sheet, you can see the existing conditions plan, and right in the center of the plan, you see that wetland line running north and south. And if you start at the north and head down, it jogs to the left to the west. So that's a newer delineation line that we came up with. The previous plans had some old mapping lines, some old delineation lines that were more straight up and down. But when we went out, we found the wetland line to go a little bit further to the west, which is shown here. Again, with that 50-foot wetland perimeter buffer set to the left of that line. So that's the biggest difference here on the existing conditions plan. On the next sheet for the proposed site plan, we've redesigned the solar project to avoid those wetland areas. So you can see again, it's kind of faded back in gray, but that wetland line runs through the center. There's a 50-foot buffer to the left of that. And that's where our limit of work, limit of disturbance, tree clearing lines, all that's where those darker lines are kind of all laid on top of each other. That's where the limit of work starts there. So similar to the last project, we have an access road coming in from West Main on the left, on the west side of the road, 20-foot wide access road. Similarly, we wanted to jog the road in to avoid poles, but also to avoid visual aspects into the project to bend the road in. So again, this road ends at the fence with a 12-foot gate, and this project is also surrounded by a 6-foot high chain link fence. Again, later on in the sheets and as discussed at design review board, 6-foot high chain link fence with a 6-inch gap at the bottom. So most of the design aspects are fairly similar to the first project. We have the 50-foot setback, the no-cut buffer along the north side, and that's maintained around the west side. And then those tree cutting areas extend out to the east and west and also to the south. Again, same type of electrical components with the inverters and the conduits and the pads and the poles. So most of the design aspects present to be the same here. So again, we're finalizing the stormwater design here with the 100-year storm, excuse me, 100-year storm event for those stormwater calculations, and we will be submitting a wetlands permit application to DEM due to the proximity to that new wetland line that we delineated. So as we go through, these are similar typical detail sheets with the typical cross section of the array, the access road, the construction entrance, the fence, things of that nature for erosion and sedimentation controls. And as was noted on the past project, there's notes in there for fertilizer and lime, and herbicides and pesticides. Those will be clarified as we proceed. So all those are clear and in conjunction with the landscape plans. Similar to the last project, in your packet, attachment F walks through the planning requirements. I believe that's on page 50 of the PDF. But again, it walks through all those items pretty much similar to the previous project. Item 1 was that the systems in accordance with local codes. Number 2 was it qualifies as a large solar system. Number 3, the same design for the panel height. It'll be less than 10 feet, sloping down to about 2 or 3 feet in the front. The yard setbacks are met. It's that same 50-foot setback. And Mr. Alverson will get into the screening again on this site. Number 5 goes into that decided for impacts to neighbors and natural resources. Again, 6, the interconnection national grid was provided. 7, the land clearing was minimized just for the installation of the project. No major grading, no topsoil stripping, just what's needed to install the project. Security fencing, the 6-foot high chain link fence with the 6-inch gap at the bottom. 9, buffer and screening, I'll leave to Mr. Alverson with the landscape plan. Number 10, also the pollinator-friendly seed mixes. 11, no lighting proposed, kept to a minimum for safety. Same for signage. Number 12, to meet the town requirements with emergency contact information. 13 was the power lines underground from the system out to the poles, and then overhead out to the existing pole for the interconnection on West Main Road. Site control will be provided with the O&M plan as we proceed. 15 was the stormwater analysis I mentioned as with the previous project currently being finalized. This was the one, again, will be clarified. Number 16 says solar energy system will be designed, constructed, and maintained to minimize the use of herbicides and pesticides. That will be clarified, be eliminated, so that herbicides and pesticides will not be used. 17, material modifications will be brought to the board. 18, as-built plans will be provided. And then again, as we go on, the applicant will submit supplemental information on abandonment, decommissioning, and financial surety. So that's all I have. I'm happy to hand it back to Ms. Anthony or take any questions.
Are there any questions, Mr. Chair?
Not so far.
Okay, sorry. All right, I'd also like to introduce again.
I do have a question.
Oh, pardon me?
What are you here for on this one?
Well, tonight.
Request for an advisory opinion.
Yes, an advisory opinion, that's correct.
So this is not here for master plan review.
No, we are not here for master plan review.
All right, just want to make sure.
Yes. Okay, then I would like to ask Mr. Alverson to go over the landscaping plans.
Sure. Kevin Alverson, landscape architect and president of Kevin M. Alverson Landscape Architecture. To give a sort of an overall of this project site, it's a little different in that this site certainly a large portion of the area that is intended to have the solar arrays is actually previously cleared. So again, I had walked this site back in late January and early February as well, and reviewed the existing buffering to the abutters around the perimeter of the site, and also viewed from West Main Road. There's currently an existing driveway access that enters the site off of West Main Road. Intent is to utilize that existing entrance, but as Mr. Vardakis had mentioned before, again, we work closely with the team to try to develop a roadway entranceway that would minimize views from West Main Road into the site. So as you can see along the western side or left-hand side of the sheet, we're turning the road and moving it to the north and then making the access further up, which provides an opportunity for us to be able to sort of densely plant with evergreen vegetation at that point to block the view angles. Along the northern portion of the site, you can see the area that's shaded in like an orangey color there. That is where there is some substantial vegetation that's out there, and it's typical vegetation that you'd see in sort of stripped soils like this. We call them pioneer species. So there's a lot of eastern red cedar. There's some birch in there. There's some black cherry, and a lot of it, in particular, the cedars are actually fairly mature and large in size. So working with the design team, what the intent is to actually utilize a good number of those to help supplement our supplemental buffering around the perimeter of the site. For two reasons. One, I think it's good practice to be able to utilize plants that we know grow really well within the soils that are right there. So it makes sense to utilize those. They've been growing there for a decade or more. And two, it allows us to get some really good dense vegetation and height where we need it. So around the perimeter of the site, again, we're meeting the 50-foot setback requirement, which we are considering our no-cut zone, which would eliminate any cutting of the large of any vegetation in there other than vegetation I was spoken to before about perhaps any trees that may be overhanging proposed panels, or if there are trees that may be a fall hazard due to dead wood and just general health of the trees if they're going to pose a safety risk. And then we'll be proposing along the northern border, again, a dense evergreen buffer you can see in the northwest area. That's where it gets closer to the property line, and it's going to be a little thinner in vegetation. So we're looking to take a lot of those existing cedars that are there and sort of relocating them and allocating them along that property, or along the fence line, I should say, along the north. So it's on the southern side of that 50-foot minimum no-cut buffer. Similarly, along the southwest corner where we're abutting residences fairly closely, that would be the same intent. Although we also have the ability to be able to maintain vegetation within that, or inside, I should say, that 50-foot no-cut buffer. So going north and east of the 50-foot no-cut buffer, we're going to have another 50 feet, give or take, minimum, and then it goes larger in certain areas, but of that limited clearing vegetation. In those areas, it is fairly dense with some shrub vegetation and things that you would likely see growing in habitats like this. So there's winterberry, there's some scrub cherries, there's scrub saplings of different trees. So we'd be doing basically shade pruning to be able to maintain and maximize the solar collection capacity of the panels. And as you go towards the southern portion of the site, you can see that limited clearing area widens, but we also have well over 300-400 feet before the property line at the southern edge of the site. Again, we worked with the team to be able to kind of, maximize the area of where we're putting the solar array while being cognizant of the topography and things in those areas. And so we're in order to try and minimize the amount of clearing that's necessary. As Mr. Vardakis had mentioned earlier, we have the wetland complex that's along the eastern portion of the site. We'll be respecting all DEM boundaries and perimeter wetlands. So there's a 50-foot setbacks required by law from that wetland system, and our buffer, our limited clearing area, which would only remove large trees again, would be in addition to that, so 50 to 75 feet in addition to that, and that's where the fence line would be. The second sheet to this, again, this is conceptual in nature, but this is the design intent and methodology that we're looking to utilize out here. But again, like with all of these projects, we want to maintain the ability to be able to look at the site as it's being developed and adjust plantings as necessary to make sure that the intent of the plan is being met, which is obscuring the proposed facility from the abutters and from the abutting public roadways. The secondary sheet is mainly, again, details of the proper plantings and also notes and specifications about the planting, which outline the 2-year minimum maintenance, warranty or guarantee on the plants. So for 2 years, if they need to be replaced due to illness or whatever may happen, then they would be replaced, and another warranty would be given to that, the additional 2-year warranty for any plant that's replaced within that time frame. We also did receive comments from the Design Review Board, which we've incorporated into this latest edition of the plans, which largely they wanted to utilize all evergreen tree vegetation in the areas that we're showing the supplemental plantings. We did have some additional shrub vegetation. We do feel that some of those larger shrubs we probably will use in addition to the larger evergreens, but at least meeting the Design Review Board's advisory opinion, we will be using those evergreen trees, which we largely will like to utilize and those existing cedars to the greatest extent capable, but then we would also be including some supplemental trees, potentially more cedar, but also some pitch pine and some white pine. Those are trees that will give you a little bit quicker growth, and they'll also they can take the types of soils that we're expecting to find out here. It's very sandy, very gravelly soil, And those are plants that you would see basically in reclaimed graveling areas. It's essentially the first plants that come in and help fix the soil for the future. And then underneath the array, again, we'll be working with the project engineers to develop the seed mix to make sure that we're providing something that ensures pollinator habitat and also habitat for the avian species and small mammals that we'll find out within the site. I don't know if I think I may have, I think that may be everything from my standpoint, but if there's any questions from the board, I'm happy to answer any.
Questions? All right, I'm going to interrupt right now. We're going to take a 5-minute break. I have to move. Yep. All right, let's get back to it. Questions of this witness? Where are we, Mike? Here we go. All right, Counselor, anything further?
No, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Members of the public?
Is it Teresa Capello? Teresa, if you could give your full name and your address for the record.
Yes, Teresa Capello, 7 Lehigh Terrace.
Your question.
Well, it's a little bit of a statement and a question. So we recently purchased the Lehigh property in November. Certainly with the future plan to build a second home on lot 6. So learning about this plan for the adjacent land most recently is certainly a concern. I've been listening to all the other abutters from the down the road project with their concerns about property value and environmental impact. And of course, I share those same concerns, but also we have sort of a triple whammy that solar just keeps following us. We're also the owners of the Paw Prince Realty property and just recently opened the Shell Rapid Lube business in West Main Road in December. And certainly, you know, we had many rigorous loops to jump through to get that going. And, you know, as Mr. Howard had mentioned, you know, the ugly blight of the Navy solar project is right in front of our face. And, you know, we weren't expecting that to happen. And now to realize that the Russo Road abutment project is happening, and now another project behind my backyard is of concern. So there's a few things swirling around in my mind. One, you know, there's also word that National Grid is going to be selling off 800,000 customers in this area. And so what does that mean for us with this project? Also owning property in Bristol, I know that on the island in Portsmouth in particular, you know, cost per kilowatt of energy is almost $4 more per kilowatt than it costs in Bristol. You know, how is all of this development, you know, that we have to look at going to benefit Aquidneck Island and or the Portsmouth energy consumers?
Is that a statement or a question?
Well, that's sort of part of the question. You know, what are the benefits for Portsmouth consumers? We certainly know what the negatives are with, you know, property values, environmental concerns, all of that.
Counselor? You there?
Oh, she's muted.
She's muted. You're muted, Counselor.
So sorry again. I was going to ask Mr. Milnes if he would like to comment on that.
You were asking what the benefits are to Portsmouth?
Correct.
I mean, Portsmouth created a solar ordinance to promote solar within Portsmouth. So, you know, we're following that. There is some financial tangible tax benefits to the town of Portsmouth from this project.
How about the actual electric customers? National Grid is planning to sell off to a Pennsylvania company 800,000 customers, and I believe we are in that cohort. And I know, you know, we have quite a costly per kilowatt rate for electric use.
Right.
With all this solar being in Portsmouth, is that going to benefit the actual residential customers?
No, I mean, the National Grid is selling Rhode Island to, I think it's Pennsylvania Power and Light. So that's not going to affect the rates we pay. You know, renewable energy is, you know, promoted by the state, you know, to promote renewable energy, to lower their carbon footprint. You know, the climate bill that's in the state right now is going to try to get to, you know, carbon-free, I think, in 30 years, you know.
Yeah, 2050 or something, yeah.
Right, and to reach those goals, you know, solar is a piece of that puzzle. Offshore wind is a piece of the puzzle. Solar is a piece of the puzzle. You know, the way how you know, your house, you know, and you know, how you use power is a piece of the puzzle. There's many pieces of the puzzles that will all come together. And, you know, projects like this will obviously help that piece. And, you know, and I think that's why the town is, I'm not going to speak for the town, but the town, they may have some feedback on, you know, why they created the ordinance. But, you know, I think it's coming from the state up, state down, you know what I mean, to kind of promote it in the right areas.
Yeah, so I've been listening to all of the back and forth about working with the abutters. I mean, we're pretty close to butter in terms of the, you know, what's being planted and, you know, all of that. You know, like I said, for future development on that closest lot is what's, you know, the concern for.
We're definitely, this is Scott Mills. I mean, we're definitely sensitive to where you are.
Okay.
You know, we have the fence line planted. We have a lot of, Kevin has a lot of species to work with in that area that we're looking at.
Yep.
And we can come closer to your property line instead of on the fence line there. You know, if you wanted to plant the property line out, we could do an evergreen planting on the property line, push it away from our fence line. Because I think that's clear there anyway. So, you know, we would definitely, you know, be happy to meet you with Kevin and work with you of where, you know, how and where you would want stuff planted out on that line there.
Great, that would be important for me.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, thank you.
No problem. What's up, Mike?
And any voters that want to give public comment, please raise your hand in the Zoom app or dial *6 from your phone.
Okay. I assume, Counselor, you want to make the advisory.
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
Design Review Board, Exhibit A, Exhibit 1.
Yes, please.
Anything else, Counselor?
No, we have nothing else.
What exactly are you looking for from us?
I'm sorry, sir?
What is it exactly you're looking from us?
Well, we're looking for a favorable advisory opinion. We are asking that the planning board forward a recommendation of approval of a special permit to the zoning board.
All right, what's the pleasure of the board? What?
But President, if I may, Mike Ashola, Assistant Town Planner, there are still a number of items that aren't complete at this time in their application. Project schedules, evidence of approval from state agencies. There's no emergency management plan on file. There's a decommissioner restoration plan on file. An estimate of the tax revenue hasn't been provided. So I'm not sure this project's ready to go before the zoning board tomorrow night with the outstanding information.
Your response, Counselor.
Yes, Mr. Assiola, thank you so much for pointing that out. As you know, this is, you know, the first time we've been through this different process. And I believe that we were under the impression that we could make these conditions of your recommendation. These are things that are the OMM plan, the decommissioning. These are things that certainly usually are handled later in the process. This is a new process for us. I'm just wondering if there's any way that these can be made conditions of your recommendation, of approval.
I have no problem with that. I don't know.
Or if you give it a try, Ed.
We're gonna need a list from you, Michael.
Mike, could you just repeat that list again?
Yes. Draft the staff report that I haven't finished yet.
Could we just incorporate the staff report?
It's not in, it's not.
No, just the list.
Just a little. Part of
If you go down through the right-hand column, everything that, outstanding or hasn't been provided is in bold.
I see, okay, all right, I'll take a shot at it. I make a motion that, we forward a favorable recommendation to the applicant, to the zoning board review, with the following recommendations. I'm gonna borrow from Mr. Tibbetts' original one, for Solar Farm One, which was the, incorporate the design review plan, which I think we've done. The RIPD's, permit and the 100-year storm analysis if required, as requires. No pesticides or herbicides per number 16 of attachment F. The applicant has to submit an O&M plan. We need to see a phase 1 environmental survey. As for any other wetlands permits that the applicant has to see, that is incorporated. I'd like to see written into the recommendation also that the applicant is required to utilize the native species of the red cedar, so noted on overall concept landscape plan L-1 as noted. I'd also like to add that the applicant worked with the abutter at 7 Lehigh Terrace for the screening as noted in the meeting minutes for this meeting. And then as far as the planning department recommendations, I'll just go down the list. It appears we need the name and contact info for the installer, the representative, and an operator. We need a schedule and a time frame for the construction phase. We need a physical alteration permit. We need a preliminary determination application to the Rhode Island, from Rhode Island DEM freshwater wetland section. Make note to the pollinator-friendly seed mixture should also be added to the notes on this application as well. I think, Mike, that is, did I capture everything in bold?
Estimate of annual tax revenue.
Oh, and then please submit the annual tax revenue plan and the decommissioning plan.
A photo rendering of the completion of the project.
Photo rendering of the completion of the project.
And the project construction schedule.
I think we got that one.
Yeah.
Project construction schedule, and I hope the DD caught all that.
Poor Dee Dee. Yeah. Did you get all that, Dee Dee?
Yeah, I got most of it. I've got it. I just, what was before the photo rendering of the construction?
Tax revenue plan,
Tax revenue plan, and then there was something after that.
commissioning plan.
Commissioning plan. Okay. Thank you.
That it?
That's it, sir.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. Mr. Harding.
Aye.
Mr. Lopes.
Aye.
Ms. Wilson. We'll come back. Mr. Garceau.
I think he needs the thumbs too.
Aye.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kate's got thumbs up
Mr.
too.
Tibbetts.
Aye.
Palat.
Aye.
Did you give us a thumbs up, Kate?
Yes.
All right, so she voted in favor.
Either that-
Chair votes in favor. It's unanimous.
It might be hitchhiking.
I don't think she's hitchhiking.
Okay, all right.
All right. All set, Counselor?
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you, members of the board.
All right.
Good luck.
And Mr. Osceola.
Everybody.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Next item on the agenda is our monthly project status report. Anything we need to look at, Mr. Lozinski?
I have nothing more to add.
All right, is there a motion to place it on record?
Yes.
Accept and place on record?
Set the place on the record.
All right. All in favor, say aye. We'll go
Aye.
the long way. We gotta do it the long way.
All right.
Mr. Harding,
Aye.
Mr. Lopes.
Aye.
Ms. Wilson, thumbs up, got it. Mr. Garceau.
Aye.
Tibbetts,
Aye.
Palat,
Aye.
chair votes in favor. Motion to adjourn?
Yes, motion to
So
adjourn.
moved.
So who's gonna do the honors?
Aye.
Luke's got the motion,
Second.
we're out of here.
Hey, Mike, can you make sure the meeting has the one block? Thank you.